Okay. I love it. I didn't have to say anything. Aloha. Good afternoon, folks. Except for you gentlemen in the front. You're from Jersey, you know. Anyway, good afternoon. Aloha. Very nice to see all of you wonderful folks here in the room today. And a warm welcome to those who are joining us on Zoom and who will enjoy this for many, many years after this. But my name is Thomas Daubert. I'm Executive Director of the Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuges. And we're honored to participate in this partnership that brings these monthly talk story events together. And boy, are you, I mean, I probably say this every month, but boy, are you in for a real treat today, taking us into a different aspect of who we are as a friends group, who we are as an organization maintaining this incredible historic space. And we're going to learn all about it today from someone who really, we got a great glimpse of it from a presentation this morning. Like I said, just this gentleman has so much great history to share, and it's going to be great to walk through that together. But before I do, this is my chance to do a little bit of an ad for us as a friends group and give you a couple of little programmatic updates before I pass the mic over to Woody, whom we're going to enjoy today. So we are the dedicated nonprofit friends group established over 42 years ago to help support our island's 3 national wildlife refuges. And again, we're just as a small island are so fortunate to have 3 federally protected spaces on our island to help protect and preserve the native wildlife, including Hanalei, Hula'ia, and Kilauea Point. And quickly, if you're not as familiar with some of these spaces, Hanalei and Hula'ia were established in 1972 and 1973 to help support waterbird species. And again, this is the year where we're really trying to bring a lot more awareness to these species. Many of us know the seabirds at Kilauea Point because that space is open to the public, but these native wetland birds really need our awareness, leading to our support and our participation to help maintain their populations. Not in our lifetime are we going to let them go extinct, and that's what we're here for, and we know that's why you're here as well. So we thank you so much for all your love, support, and participation in what we do. And again, this is the year of helping to bring that story to light. So we'll continue to talk more about that as the year goes on. But of course, Kilauea Point, not only home to our beloved lighthouse, but also an incredible home for seabirds, one of the premier habitats across the whole Pacific region for endangered seabird populations, as you see, just by coming out and having a visit and just being able to witness that. It's really quite something. As a friends group, what do? Basically, we raise money and we provide in-kind staffing support, and we do community outreach like we're doing today, connecting with our community, talking story, educating people about the work, and from that place of awareness can bring them into finding out how they can help and how we can collectively help. Some of the programs that we are plugged into that we do frequently is certainly you've heard me champion my love for our wildlife rehabilitation program, providing financial support to our incredible friends, Save Our Shearwaters, and helping to provide the financial means they need to help care for all of the sick and injured birds transferred from one of our 3 refuges and into their care. And this year, we're pleased to be providing $50,000 to be able to do that work. So we're really honored to be able to continue to support them on their growth and really the growth in need, which is a good problem to have. There's more wildlife that needs us, and we're there able to step up. We get out into the community and educate young people and adults. And like I said, awareness is the first step. If you don't know about these birds, then you can't move to the next place of caring and action. So we get out and have all kinds of fun different ways, including our little Keiki wildlife awareness game here that brings families over to our table, and we engage in some great conversations. And that's linked to our support of environmental education. Just this morning, there was another field trip visiting Kilauea Point, and we provide completely cover the cost of the buses that brings those school groups to the refuge for those incredibly inspirational moments for those young people. The other end of the educational support spectrum is our Daniel Moriarty Memorial Scholarship Fund and application process we're in the middle of right now. So if you know any young people that are interested in studying in any kind of environmental awareness career, the applications for our scholarship process go through the end of this month, so just another week or so. And then our board of directors gets to review these amazing applications and just hear about already the inspirational work of these young people that were volunteering and doing great work. And it's really our pleasure to be able to participate in the future of conservation. Last year, we gave away $30,000 and supported 14 young people. So we hope to do that again this year. So like I said, help spread the word. Application process available on our website, open till April 30th. The real meat and potatoes of why we're here is to fill in the funding gaps in the Fish and Wildlife budget. Now more than ever, their budgets are squeezed, their staffing is reduced, and they need our help. And boy, have we had an incredible honor over the last year as this has really tightened and gotten much more difficult to be able to share that need with the community. They've responded in such a beautiful way that we have been able to step up, and we've never given more back to Fish and Wildlife than we have in the last year or so. Last year, we allocated over $200,000 in support of direct programmatic impact all over the spectrum of their need, thanks to the generosity of our community. And I want to recognize today, representing our friends in Brown, is Kathleen. She's here with us today. It was our absolute honor and privilege to work alongside Fish and Wildlife in this mission. And I know just my huge mahalo to Kathleen. She's an incredible, incredible steward of volunteers. There are a lot of you here today. And that is a whole nother workforce that helps make this work possible. And she's just an amazing leader of that. And thank you for all you do. So we basically raise money and transfer that to Fish and Wildlife. And this year as well, we're really pleased to say, obviously we know we've been talking, gosh, it's been maybe about a year or so, maybe not quite that long, this particular restoration effort's been going on. Anyone remember how when
we started talking 3 years ago.
So a decent amount of time about that.
Yeah.
But as they're getting to the tail end of it, they realized there were some costs that were not included in the original scope of work. And they came to our board and said, is there any way that we can help? And it was meaty, it was a couple of substantial pieces left in it. And I'm sorry to say we weren't able to deliver the full amount that was needed, but I'm really honored to say with those super fast emergency request of our board, we were able to look into our cash reserves and provide a $65,000 gift to help fund some of the really strategic pieces so they can safely step away from this project and know that they've really accomplished what they wanted to come here to do. So it's really our honor to be able to step in, thanks to the generosity of our donors and our board, to stretch ourselves into our cash reserves to do that. So it's just the year of us finding different ways to say yes. And I'm just so honored, chicken skin moment, that thanks to the generosity of our community, we get to say yes and help. If you love what we do or want to find out more, visit us at Kīlauea Point, shop our nature store. Every dollar in the nature store comes back into our mission. Volunteering your time, as we're talking about, volunteers are an incredible part of who we are and what we do as a shared organization. And as I've said, we couldn't do what we do without the generosity of donors and members to our friends group. So if you're online, please check us out on our website. If you're not connected with our monthly newsletter, I'm the author on the other end of that. So if you're at all interested, there's a sign-up sheet in the back of the room here. I'd really welcome having you join our monthly newsletter, and you'll get to hear about all the great work that we're doing. And with that, a quick plug for next month as we continue this series. Kim Rogers is going to come back, this time with her Hawaii Invasive Species Committee hat, talking about ohia, rapid ohia death, and kind of shift it up again as well. She's going to talk story about how they're helping the advances in that effort, which is a challenging, long effort of conservation and work, but as well to bring a forest journaling kind of hands-on exercise into the room. And we're going to find some ways as well to extend that into a hybrid experience for those online. So anyway, May 12th is the next one. Put that on your calendar and join us again. But with that, we are in for a treat with Mr. Woody here. So let me do a brief introduction of this gentleman, and then I'll get out of the way because he's what you really came here for. So Mr. James Woodward was a 40-year employee of the U.S. Coast Guard, retiring in January of 2004. His career began in 1963 as an enlisted man, and after leaving active military duty in 1967, he returned as a civilian in the civil engineering section and served in that capacity until 1981. His main focus was lighthouse-related projects, including reconstruction, maintenance, and preservation, and he worked extensively on the lighthouse automation program during the 70s and the 80s. After that, he served as an environmental protection specialist until retiring in 2004. Doesn't really look like he retired though, but we really appreciate it. And upon his quote unquote retirement, but from the Coast Guard, Woody was awarded the Commander's Award for Sustained Excellence and was cited in the award as being the single greatest resource for lighthouse and Fresnel lens preservation in the Coast Guard. Wow, and we get to hear from him here today. Yeah. He's the owner of the Lighthouse Consultant, and he's going to talk about all the great work he does. Woody, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah.
Sir.
One more click forward, and it's you.
All right.
Mahalo.
And am I on?
Let me make sure. Yes, you are.
Okay.
All you.
Great.
Thank you, folks.
Well, thanks for coming. I hope I can entertain you for an hour without getting too boring. First, I want to take just a couple of minutes and say, Jake, thank you very much. He's the project manager of the entire Lighthouse Preservation Project. ICC, International Chimney, JP, Scott, and what's your name? Sounds like Sam. Yeah. From International Chimney, we could not have done what we did in the amount of time that we got it done in without those three gentlemen. Absolutely. Big round of applause. And finally, I could have done none of it without my crew, who are both now very seasoned lampists with, what, about 16 years each now? That's a lot of experience in the lens business. Tommy Camella and Leon Hodge. All right, thank you very much for everybody for all the help we were given in this process. You have a beautiful lens, and it right now at least is really beautiful again. It's gorgeous. So I originally wrote this particular program that we're going to start. I wrote it for the University of Michigan because the physics department of the university got wind of mercury float lenses. And they did a little research, and I just so happened I knew the director of the optics department at U of M. And he said, would you come and do a talk on mercury float lenses? Because there's a lot of physics involved in one of those things. So it was really aimed for the physics school, but it turned into something I can do almost anywhere. So lightning lights. Well, lightning lights in French is faux éclair, which means the light or the brilliance of lightning. That's exactly what it means. And I can tell you this from my own sailing experiences, that you get 18 miles out from that lens and you see the flash from that flash panel, and it looks like a flash of lightning. It really, really does. And then a few seconds later, the next panel goes by your eye and you see another flash of lightning. So they're extremely visible, and they're just beautiful machines. So we're going to talk about quite a few different little bits and pieces all stuffed together here. But first, I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a lot about mercury float lenses. I want to talk a little bit when we first start with about mercury, because you ought to know a little bit about mercury before we get into things you can and you shouldn't do with it. And then we're going to get into just some basic information on the orders of lenses and the characteristics of lenses and the rotation speeds, because those all fit together into why they invented these things in the first place. Not the original lens, but the mercury float lens. Why did they go to the trouble of making it? going to that kind of technology. So we'll get into that very quickly. But first, I do want to introduce you to mercury. Mercury comes out of a red rock. Very rarely in the world will you find pockets of mercury in pools. It does happen on rare occasions in certain geology, but in general, the red rock that it comes from, cinnabar, has the biggest deposits of cinnabar are in Spain. So that's really where primarily the most of the mercury in the world comes from, Spain. Some comes from Canada. The symbol for mercury is Hg. Why is it Hg? Well, it's the Greek word hydrargyrum. Hydrar being water-like, liquid, and gyrum being silver. Makes sense to me. Silver water. It sort of works. It's sort of like that. And the Romans used it. The Romans named it after their god Mercury, because if you've ever spilled mercury on the floor and tried to pick it up, it's just like mercury, gone. It runs around. You can't pick it up. There's ways to do it, but most people don't know how when they drop their thermometer, and it's just all they're running, getting caught in the joints of your floors, and poisoning you for the next 20 years because it's always off-gassing, and people don't think about that fact. Luckily, there's not enough to really hurt you from a thermometer, but the Chinese believe that it extended life. So they swallowed it.
Oh.
I don't think anybody lived longer in China because they were swallowing mercury. Just briefly, there's 3 ways you can be exposed to mercury. You can inhale the vapors from it up your nose. You can have skin contact with it. It goes right through your skin. Or you can ingest it. You can swallow it. Of those 3 choices, always pick swallow, because it doesn't stay in there very long. It actually moves through rather quickly. So it's sort of helpful in that way. But if you inhale it, it goes up your nose into your lungs. From your lungs, it goes to your bloodstream, and from your bloodstream, it goes to your soft tissues like livers and kidneys and those sorts of things, and bone. And then it gets jammed in there, and it doesn't come back out. And so you spend the rest of your life trying to get rid of it. And I will never get rid of all the mercury I've got in me just from one job. But it doesn't bother me too much. It doesn't bother me hardly at all. Contact, skin contact, that's absolutely the worst. It goes right through your skin into your bloodstream. It doesn't have to take a detour through your lungs, and heads right for all your soft tissues. So if you see mercury, stay away from it. That's the smartest thing to do. Or at least wear protective equipment if you have to deal with it. So anyway, the Chinese thought they should swallow it to extend their lives. The Greeks rubbed it into their skin, believe it or not, as an ointment. Why not? So here they are, they're just pushing it right into their soft tissues as an ointment. And the Romans used the red rock to color their lips and their cheeks, kind of like rouge. So here we are rubbing something. Don't ever put mercury on your skin because it goes right through. And they're decorating their faces with it. And associated with the mercury that they're decorating their bodies with, they're also drinking water from a lead pipe water supply system, right? So the Romans had a real love affair with toxic metals. They must have really loved the thing because they just kept ingesting them constantly. As an amalgam, mercury, obviously, you go to the dentist, get a filling, mercury fillings. It doesn't really dissolve silver. It actually is a different chemical process called amalgamation. And the two bond to each other. Most people say, well, mercury dissolves gold. Mercury does not dissolve gold. Mercury amalgamates with gold. There's a different process to separate the two back out. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that later in the presentation about amalgam. And in modern times, it was used in thermometers. Everybody had a mercury thermometer probably. Manometers for taking blood pressure, barometers for reading the weather, and munitions and dentistry. You cannot fire a bullet without mercury. It's physically impossible. The little cap in the back of the bullet that makes the spark that lights the gunpowder that pushes the bullet out is a pressure-sensitive chemical called fulminate of mercury. And its pressure, as soon as that hammer hits it, it makes a spark, and that's what lights the bullet. So the government likes to keep mercury because it's a defense tool. And they have quite a bit of it in storage just for that purpose. In terms of its density, mercury is 13.6 times more dense than water. So it's really, really, really dense stuff. And I've had the pleasure of playing with this stuff in buckets when we've been taking it out of the lens. And I'll tell you what, you have an inch or two of mercury in a bucket with a rubber glove on, and you push down on the mercury pushes back. It's not like putting your hand in your dish pan in water. It literally doesn't want your hand going in. It'll push it right back out, which is how the mercury float lens works, by the way. So they mined the cinnabar, and in the ancient world, again, all the large mines were in Spain. In Rome, they were very creative because their capital prisoners, rather than just sending them to the lion show, they sent most of their capital prisoners to the cinnabar mines in Spain. And more or less, they got about 3 years out of them mining the cinnabar before they fell over dead from mercury poisoning. So, I mean, it all went around and came around, and the Romans benefited by getting ointment that they could put all over their skin. Everybody was a winner. Yeah, it can be quite toxic, as we already just talked about. And if we have time at the end, we'll talk about Mad as a Hatter. But now back to the lighthouse business here for a little bit. So the great inventor. This is Augustine Fresnel. He's the man who is at the root of the inventions that made that lens. Now he goes back to 1821. He was a engineer. He went to the French military academy, graduated as an officer. He also specialized in physics. And so he makes his first lens in 1821. And you'll at least see part of a picture of his first lens. And then he left notes in volumes like this. He wrote constantly, and he was a genius. And he says, "I propose to float my rotating device in a bath of mercury instead of placing it on rollers. Well, why would he want to do that? As you will see when we get to the picture of his lens, he built this lens and he set it on big wheels, and they rolled around on a table, and you'll see it all. And that was driven by a clockwork with a weight dropping down the tower. Well, he didn't care about speed. We're going to get into speed later, but he cared about economy. You put these big brass wheels on a steel table to roll around turning a lens. Every 5 years, those brass wheels would wear to the point that you had to replace them, because they would get smaller and smaller, and finally the gears wouldn't line up with each other anymore. So you had to make a new set of wheels. And he saw that as a great economic imposition to have to keep making these wheels over and over and over again. So he proposes floating it in a bath of mercury, which is a friction-free bearing. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't get smaller. It just works. So that was his idea, but unfortunately, 2 years after he wrote that, he was dead. He died at the age of 39, and because he had been dealt like the worst set of lungs in the world. He died of tuberculosis and just left all these wonderful volumes of stuff behind. I can't imagine what he would have invented had he lived. So his comment about, he also says at the very end, this project won't present many difficulties in making the mercury bath a reality. Well, we'll see about that. He knew what he was thinking, how this thing was going to work. No problem for him. But it took 65 years before another set of engineers could figure out how to actually make it work. It's kind of a complicated machine. So we're going to just look at lenses a little bit, just lenses. We're not necessarily going to be discussing mercury floats for the next slide or two. But lenses, their orders, which is their sizes, which is important. And we're going to talk a little bit about various characteristics and what that were available and what were their rotation speeds. That's very important. So all lenses have characteristics, and they all have a rotation speed or not if they're fixed. So just a little chart. This is a cross section through when Fresnel invented his lens. He proposed 6 different orders. So this is a 6-foot man or woman standing next to all the cross sections of the lenses, just to give you a scale. This is the first order, second order, third order, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Those are Fresnel's orders. And those were just half of the lens. So take the 2 and stick them together and you got the lens. Well, as time went on and Fresnel died, the British came up and finally got into the lens business, and I'm not going to belabor that in this talk, but they finally ended up with 11 orders. So they went 2 sizes bigger from that first order, and the biggest one being a hyper-radial lens, which is 8'8" in diameter and stands 12 feet tall. It's a monster lens. There's one at Moʻolelo Point on Oahu. The only one the U.S. ever bought is there. And I restored that 15 years ago, maybe. But it's a monster lens. And I'll stay away from that talk because that goes in a place we don't need to go right now. So the Brits had 11. The French and the U.S. ignored the 2 tiniest ones, which were 7th and 8th orders, which are smaller than those at the far side. They got down to like being this big, which is crazy for that much glass work. You can cast those if you need them in that size. So, so the naming, why, what are they talking about when they say first order, second order, third order, fourth, fifth, and sixth? Well, I was asked in a presentation many years ago, what was the mathematical formula that Fresnel was involved with that gave him these orders, first, second, third, fourth? Well, here's his mathematical formulas that he was working on. He says you got 6 lighthouses. They're all standing on the same cliff. They're all facing, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean. And you have ships coming from France or Britain to the US, right? Okay. When they hit 20 miles out, you're looking at all 6 lighthouses on this coast. Of course, you can't see 20 miles, really. The horizon gets in the way. But as soon as you get in a little teeny weeny bit closer, you'll see a light, one light. You see it first. It's the brightest. So the first order is the one that goes out the furthest. That's it. A second order, you sail in a little bit more, a few miles, you'll see it. Now you'll see 2 lights, the first and the second. All the way down till you get within 6 miles of the coast, and you'll see all 6 of them. And that's the whole mathematical horribleness of how he named his lens orders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the order that you see them in coming from the sea. It's just that simple. So he didn't get overcomplicated when he didn't need to. You know, he wasn't one of those kind of people. But just to give you an idea of size, that hyperradial, 8 foot 8 inches across. That's a monster lens. First order is 6 foot 1, and you get down to the 6th order, and that's 11 inches in diameter. And that's the range of those sizes. And it's all based on what did the service want for the visible range of the light. What did they think the mariner, at what point did they want the mariner to see the light? They wanted them to see it at 10 miles. All fine. They'd use a 5th order lens to do that. Characteristics, lenses all had a characteristic. This is a fixed lens. Fixed lenses just send out a wall of light. They're always on. They're like a light bulb. So it's a light that's always shining. It doesn't flash. It doesn't do anything. It just is always there. These are 2 flashing lenses, an 8-panel lens. Fresnel's lens looked like this without the top and the bottom. His lens looked exactly like this. And so this is 8 flash panels. When this thing goes around 1 revolution, you have seen 8 flashes. And depending on the speed of its rotation, that gives you the spacing on how quickly you'll see the flashes. This is a 24 flash panel. This is the biggest they ever made in numbers of panels, 24 flash panels. And so you get 3 times the amount of flashes out of that lens than you do out of this one in the same rotation speed. If that makes sense, I hope. But all of these lenses, all these rotating lenses, no matter what, rotated at a speed of 1 revolution every 8 to 10 minutes. Now, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to turn around once. That's how slow these lenses went around. They didn't go around like this. They were barely, you could barely see them move when they were rotating. Why? Well, because it was all based on machinery. you have a great big heavy lens sitting up here. And you should be able to see, I think maybe, the wheels right here that this lens is rotating on. So you got a lens sitting on cast iron arms that are sitting on top of little wheels, and a weight going out of the clockwork assembly down the tower and going through a clockwork with 1,000,000 gears in it, a big box of gears. All that friction, they just didn't go fast because there was so much machinery involved and so much friction in all that machinery that they went pretty darn slow. So that started to become kind of an issue. In a little while, you'll see the issue. So Fresnel's roller assembly, this is his right here. This is his first lens from 1821. These are the wheels that he hated right here. Because he said, if I could put this in a mercury float, I could make it go around any speed I wanted it to. And he was right, he could, but he didn't get around to building it before he croaked. And to up through, good Lord, even in my time with the Coast Guard. So after 63, lenses were still rotating on these wheels. These are called chariot wheels. And they were wearing out every 5 years and being replaced because they had to. But nobody was going to make that a mercury float lens either. I mean, it was already fixed that it was going to be a pedestal lens rolling on a chariot assembly. So we already talked about the wheels. Yeah, this was the standard of the industry until 1890. Driven by a clockwork with weights falling down the tower, just like a grandfather clock. Same exact kind of concept. They could adjust the speed slightly, but not very much. There were fan governors on the clockwork assembly itself, and they could change the fan governor to get a little more rotation. That's the only way they could change the characteristics. So just a quick look at what clockworks look like. This is actually a colonial era clockwork, and it was used in a restaurant or a kitchen, and it turned a spit with a big chunk of meat on it. But this is the exact same concept. There's a weight coming off of this drum and dropping down the kitchen wall. And as that goes down, the meat goes around like this. That's how it worked. Clockworks were around from the 1500s, so the concept was not new. And then this is a lighthouse clockwork. This is I believe a first order. This is as big as they came, right here. All those little gears in there and all these little pinions going around and around and around with lots and lots of friction. So that's why these things were so slow. So why did we start talking about the need for speed? Well, on account of because sailing ships weren't very fast. They were pretty slow in the water. So when you're dealing with a lens that is putting out a slow flash, that's all right when you're dealing with sailing vessels because they sort of worked with each other. Lens is slow, the sailing vessels are slow. The people on the ship could see a flash from the light, and the man on watch had a stopwatch. And when he saw the flash, he hit his stopwatch and it started. When he saw the second flash, he hit it again and stopped it. That gave him the space between the flashes. And And all the sailors had charts, and they had, if they were good sailors, they had charts that showed the characteristic of a light. And by knowing the timing of the flashes, they could look at the chart and say, oh, that's a flash every 3 minutes, or whatever it was. It doesn't matter. That's umpty squat light. So in the middle of the night, they know what they're looking at. And that's how it worked. But after steam comes in and iron vessels take over, these guys move a lot faster through the water than these guys do. And so suddenly, those really slow moving lenses are not providing enough information, because that ship is moving a lot faster through the water. And he needs to have information faster. So quicker lights were needed. Not only were quicker lights needed, but as commerce continued to grow, ports became more and more crowded. So they needed to build more lights just to control all this traffic they had. You know, and so the French could see that the mercury float would satisfy a big need here. If you can rotate a lens at any speed you want, and essentially you can in the bowl of mercury, then you can take those basic characteristics and make them go around a lot faster and get a lot more different kinds of flash patterns out of them. So by the time they were finished playing around with this thing, they could get one revolution every 10 seconds instead of one revolution every 10 minutes, just in a bowl of mercury. So, so that was quite the improvement. And when they really got into designing things, they started coming up with real crazy lens designs. Most lenses are fairly symmetrical. You got 6 faces that all look the same stuck together. When they got into mercury float lenses, they could do anything they wanted. And there are lenses. I've worked on a few of them. Tommy was in Alaska working on one of them with me. It looked like it landed from Mars. I kid you not. I mean, this crazy glass pattern was insane. But it was because they wanted a flash with blank, and so it's just like a triangular shaped lighthouse lens. And they could do anything they wanted on the drawing board. So all they needed was that mercury float. Well, thank you, Leon Bordelais. He was a French lighthouse engineer with their lighthouse department. And he set his mind to figuring out what Fresnel was talking about and what he had in his head on how to make this mercury float work. And it took until 1890 for him to perfect it. And that is Bordelais' first mercury float right there. So he's got himself a nice little 4th order lens sitting on a mercury float and a nice clockwork. And that lens can spin around like this if you want to, and give you tremendous amounts of flash. So Bordelais was the real genius when it comes to the mercury float. And that lens there went in 1893, actually went into service in Cape La Havre in France. And how did they work? Well, I'll show you a picture of a cross section of a pedestal, and I hope I can explain it to you. Should be pretty easy. The lens is up here on the top. This is the mercury float right here. This is the outside casting, just like you have in your lighthouse lens. This is the bowl. This right here is an inside casting inside the bowl called the float. The red is mercury. And that's how it works. You have the bowl sitting in the mercury. And the French built this nice little dome sort of thing here, pyramid, in the bottom of their lenses, help keep it centered in the bowl. If it drifted off center too much, it would bump into this little point. But there are other ways that they actually keep it on center. And so this is the whole simple assembly. You got a float, you got a bowl, and you got mercury. And this is about 1/4 of an inch thick. And it supports the weight of a lens. And I was going to tell you this at the end, but I'm going to change and tell you right now. When I originally wrote this program for U of M, and my title page said, "How to float a 4,000-pound lens in 400 pounds of mercury." Well, I had that as a subtitle on my first title page. And the director of the physics department came to me and said, "Woody, that's not right." He said, "You can't do that." I said, "What do you mean you can't do that? I've worked on these things. I know it can be done." He said, "Yeah, but when you use the word float, you are using Archimedes' rule, which is about flotation of ships, right? 10,000 ton ship displacing 10,000 tons of water will float as long as the sidewalls are high enough." He says you can't float a lot of weight in a little bit of weight of mercury. He said it's not floating. And he got very, very specific with me on that point. And I was kind of like, but it's always been called a mercury float. Come on, what are you talking about? Well, it's a true thing with physics. It's called the piston effect. And I mentioned to you, I put a rubber glove on and I pushed that mercury down in the bucket and it pushed back. And that's exactly what this mercury is doing. The weight of the lens wants to push it down. It will reach equilibrium right there, and then it will float the lens. Not floating though, it's a piston. So there you have it. So that's how it really works. Yeah. No, it deals with the fact that mercury is 13.6 times denser than water. That's what does it. It's so dense, you really have to push on it to get it to go anywhere. It just doesn't want to. So you're overcoming the density of the mercury is what you're doing. The weight? Absolutely. That's the right word? It supports it. That's very good. Yes, that's exactly what it does. It holds it up. And I suppose you could eventually keep adding weight up on the lens so you reach some magic point of weight, because it would keep pushing it down, and then it would push the mercury further up and finally out. That could happen, but you're not going to do that with a lighthouse lens. Lighthouse lens has a purpose. You're not going to start piling bricks in it to see how much it'll take you to get the mercury to leak out. So how do they work? That's how they work. And this is a real mercury float. This one's on display up on Lake Superior, and this is me and my sidekick named Jim Dunlap. We're removing the mercury from this guy because when we removed the lens from the lighthouse and delivered it to this museum, I very specifically instructed the director of the museum, I don't want you going around collecting mercury and putting it back in this lens, because it's just supposed to be a static display forever and ever and ever. That was the loan agreement he had from the Coast Guard. Well, he was a school teacher, and he thought he knew everybody in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He was calling power companies and colleges and everybody saying, do you have any mercury? Have any mercury? Well, God, these guys were just chomping at the bit to give it to somebody because they didn't want the damn, it's a hazardous material. If you don't have a need for it, why do you have it on the shelf? It's just a spill waiting to happen. And so this fine gentleman not only put mercury in that lens and was operating it in the museum, but he didn't know how much mercury to put in it because he had gallons and gallons of the stuff. So he overfills it, and then he runs the float down into the bowl, and at some point, mercury comes up over the side, right there, right at that little joint, and falls on the carpet in the museum display space. Well, they sort of swept that away. And the secretary in the front of the museum happened to notice this whole thing going on. And she said, didn't we have a mercury spill in here? And I'm working in here. And he said, oh, we cleaned it up. No problem. Not an issue. Well, she didn't believe it. And she actually called down to Chicago to EPA Region 5 and said, I'm a little concerned about where I work because I think they had a mercury spill in here. And so Region 5 sent three guys in hazmat suits with little sniffer button tools, and they walked through the museum and said, this place is full of mercury. Well, you don't do that in a museum that's open to the public, at least without warning signs on the walls that say hazard, mercury vapor hazard. You put your respirator on and stuff like that. So anyway, finally, EPA wrote them up, fined them $165,000 for the cleanup, and so this we went back after that on a contract to the museum to take the mercury back out of it again, and clean it up. And the board of directors told him, you put another drop of mercury in that lens and you're out of a job. Very simply. But when we took this lens out of the lighthouse, I just wanted to mention this little tidbit. It was properly operating in the lighthouse. And we finally reached the point where we were ready to start working on it. And we flipped the switch on the drive motor. And that lens, second order, a big one, just like yours, rotated on its own in the bowl for 3 minutes and 33 seconds before it came to a stop. So that's a pretty darn good friction-free bearing, really. So anyway, the U.S. finally gets the message that our lights aren't as good as the sailors want them to be. So you better start getting some mercury floats and changing some characteristics, because we don't have enough characteristics out there where we can safely navigate based on the characteristics that are showing. We need some quicker flashes and that fancy sort of stuff. So the US buys, this is one of the first. I can't verify for sure if it's really the first, but it's definitely one of the first mercury floats we bought. And it was installed at Cape Henry, Virginia. And it has a 9 flash panels. It's a very unusual lens, and had an unusual flash characteristic. It flashed one flash every 3.5 seconds. Now that's really splitting hairs. 3.5 seconds. So you had to at least time 2 just to get the right amount of seconds, so you could figure out the rotation speed. That's what the first one looked like. This is not what most mercury floats look like. This is a very odd French mercury float there. So let's look at some lenses. They're all mercury floats. Okay, on the left, quick flashing. This flashes very quickly. Two big bullseyes side by side, and immediately have another face that comes around and flash, flash. So this thing is going to go flash, flash, very short eclipse, goes dark, and then flash, flash, and it's got 4 sides to it. So when it goes around, you see flash, 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 flash for 1 revolution. This lens this is a first order lens. This is the 6 foot in diameter right here. On the right is the largest order of lens. This is what I mentioned, the hyperradial lens, like the one at Makapu'u. Take a look at the guy in here and look at the size of that lens. They're just monstrous. It stands 24 feet tall and 8 foot 8 in diameter. Yeah. And they could roll, they had a mercury float. They could go around like this if they wanted them to. It didn't matter. It's just still the same kind of bearing. And then they got really creative and said, well, how about a double stack? So this one doubled the intensity of the light. It's plenty that this is a first order lens. This is a British lens. 2 first order lenses stacked one on the other, perfectly in alignment. So when this thing went around, you saw both of the flashes, one on one stacked up. Talk about how bright they can get. Then the one over here is a real oddball. This was a one-of-a-kind lens built by Chance Brothers in England. And it was really kind of they built a showpiece. This is a hyperradial lens. The biggest ones, right? Hyperradials. This is also a hyperradial lens. This is the mercury float right here. And this whole platen goes around in a circle. So you have 2 hyperradial lenses going around, making a flash. You could probably see this thing. Well, you couldn't see past 20 miles because the horizon gets in the way. But if they had airplanes in those days when they built that lens, just to show what they could do. That's why they built it. It wasn't for a customer. And if there had been airplanes around in those days, airplanes could have probably seen it at 300 miles. Really, for the amount of light that would come out of that. But it never went into a lighthouse, and it finally went to the scrapyard. I mean, they had it in a museum for a while, but it was so big, it took up so much space. I mean, think about 8 foot 8 plus 8 foot 8 and 20 feet tall. That's a lot of museum space. So it eventually went the way of all things that nobody has a place for. They scrapped it. Well, yeah, they did scrap it ultimately. So now this is one of my favorite little guys right here. I think I may have got myself out of. Did I get myself out of order here? No, but I missed a slide somehow. Let me go back real quick. Yeah, this is your lens. So this is your beautiful lens. And as wonderful as they were, and they did what they did, they were expensive to buy, very expensive to buy. And they really arrived at too late. By the time we bought our first one in 1893, We quit buying them when we bought yours in 1913. So that's a 20-year span for all the mercury floats that we bought in the US. And we didn't buy many of them. I think we bought a total of like 28 or something. We didn't buy a lot of them. Because, the primary reason is because by 1890, 1893, in that range, we had already built almost all the lighthouses in the country. We started building lighthouses before in 1716 when they built Boston Harbor Light. So lighthouses kept popping up along the shoreline where they were needed over 150, 200 years. And son of a gun, we built all the lights we need. So why do we want to go and buy these really expensive things when we've already got the lights we're going to use? So it was a very short lifespan for acquisition of mercury float lenses. It came too late. We were already done with that kind of the lighthouse business. Total, we bought 40 mercury floats. And then after 1916, where they decided for some reason or another, they really wanted a real specific flash characteristic, really fast one. At Tompkinsville, New York, the main lighthouse depot for the country, which was a major industrial facility, they had their own machine shop, they had their own foundry, they had everything. And so they made their own mercury floats. And then they stuck a lens on top of them. So the French mercury floats weren't purchased anymore at all. We would buy quick flash, like your lens, buy that type of lens for a specific thing, but they'd make their own pedestal for it because they knew the technology at that point, and the technology is really not all that complicated once you know how to make it work, and that was the key to it. I have all the manufacturing records for Barbier Bernard Turenne. That's the company that made your lens, and they have an index of every lens they've sold the U.S. from 1860-ish all the way through to 1913, and this is the last entry in the list, and it stopped short on the page, so they had more lines to add to, but we didn't buy any more. So yeah, it's about the end. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Rock of Ages didn't come off the assembly line first in Paris and come to the US because they were both on the same contract. Rock of Ages and this one were both ordered on the same contract, but they were the last ones to come into the country. So cute little story here, though. Am I okay on time?
You're fine.
Okay. There's a structure. The lighthouse organization got carried away sometimes with their creativity, and they built that beautiful lighthouse. This is White Shoal. Now, White Shoal is that. Go back a few slides. That green base with me in a hazmat suit taking the mercury out of it in the museum. Well, that lens came from that lantern room. We took it out, dropped it to the deck, and took it to the beach. But White Shoal was going to be like the epitome of lighthouses. It was going to be the best thing they ever designed and built. I don't know how well you can see those little dark lines going around the tower. The whole tower is made of white glazed terracotta, which is a pretty fancy architectural material. So their thought process was, we're going to build a terracotta lighthouse, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's glazed tiles, so it'll glisten in the sunlight. It's going to look beautiful. and we'll never have to do any work to it because it's terracotta. Huh? And then, just like the terracotta, this is the only terracotta lighthouse that was ever built. In the same thought processes, they said, you know, there's this new metal coming out. They're just starting to refine it in South America. And they call it aluminum. And it's really, really, really expensive. But it will last forever. It doesn't rust. It virtually doesn't oxidize even. So let's build our lantern room out of aluminum. That whole thing is aluminum. And then they put a mercury float lens in it. Well, we talked about amalgams before. Guess what aluminum and mercury together does? When we took the lens out of the tower, when we lifted the pedestal, all this mercury came out. This is the pedestal of the lens. See all that mercury? That was all hiding under the pedestal from previous spills in the lantern room from the light keepers. These guys weren't really all that careful with mercury. They'd sweep up what they could see, and they thought they were okay. But really, it's hiding in any crack it can find. It sucks right in. And these guys were breathing all that vapor all the time. And then, just to compound the issue, there was a door at the lower gallery level, and we had one piece we had to take out that door because it was too big. One of the castings of the pedestal, the actual float and bowl mechanism, too big to get out any other out of here. So we had to roll it out the door. But the trouble with the door was that it had a sill, you know, a little splash sill, like on a ship, across the bottom of the doorway. So it was easy enough to find the mounting bolts for that. So we unscrewed it and we took it off so we had the clearance to get things out the door. And see all that blue powder? That used to be aluminum. The structure is being eaten by the lens. The aluminum in the structure is turning to blue powder. So it's a self-destructing lighthouse. And in the core, we worked on this tower constantly because it was just nothing but a pain. But ultimately, structurally, that glazed tile absorbs moisture like crazy. Just like all through all those joints at the top and the bottom and the sides, moisture goes right in. Well, you're sitting in the middle of a lake, for Pete's sake. Where do you think the moisture is going to come from? We might have a little bit out there. Well, this is also sitting at the top of Lake Michigan. It gets darn cold in Lake Michigan around December through April. Really cold. So all the moisture that gets sucked up by the terracotta goes into the bricks, and then when it freezes, it pops the face of the bricks off. And we'll continue to do that with the brick. It'll continue to go in and pop more and more and more until you don't have any brick left at all. So what the Coast Guard ultimately did was anybody in the room no, I'm sure you guys know what gunite is. It's essentially sprayed on concrete for don't need to get into all the technology of gunite. So they wrapped this whole thing in wire, and then they sprayed it with gunite. So you don't see this beautiful structure anymore. It's all, the outside walls are now this much thicker. So all these wonderful architectural details are gone. It's just a straight tower now with a red and white barber pole around it. Exactly. It's measured in pounds, and And they had a table. A second order lens was a 400-pound mercury float. A first order lens is a 600-pound mercury float. A third order lens is a 200-pound mercury float, and a fourth order lens is a 100-pound mercury float. It's not a lot. Well, let's see. What does it weigh? Thanks. Thanks. Who said it? Okay.
Of course, Mark said.
Great. I've taken mercury out of a fourth order lens, and it'll fit into a 1 gallon bottle and only maybe fill it this much. Fourth order. That's 100 pounds. Fourth is 100 pound. A third is 200 pound. The second is 400 pound, and the first order is 600 pound. And those are round numbers. It's a few gallons, yes. And so I know your paperwork doesn't agree with the rough 400 pounds. But what it does agree with is when they sent the mercury with the lens, they sent 400 pounds. They filled the lens to where it was supposed to work, and son of a gun, they had 1 gallon left. Literally 1 gallon. And if you add the weight of the gallon to what went in the lens, you have 400 pounds, almost to the ounce. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And so they why did they send extra mercury? Well, those spills there, they got sucked up and the mercury went away. They had to have a container to add to the bowl to get the lens back into balance. And they knew how to put it in balance because there was simply because of the gap. When it was floating, when it's not floating, it's sitting in the bottom of the bowl. You add mercury to it and it starts to come up. And when you got to a certain thickness of that gap, that's when you were in balance right there. It wasn't rocket science. They didn't have to do big calculations of how much to put in there and all that kind of junk. They had a little gauge that they would stick in that crack, and that when the gauge fit right in the crack, it was in balance. And that's all the coasties needed to know. They didn't need to get into fancy mathematics to figure out what was going on. That doesn't work well with little guys at lighthouses. So those were all health issues right there, and structural issues. When the lighthouse is dissolving, and the guys who work there are inhaling, it's not good for anybody. And finally, in 1972, there was a Coast Guard crew from, I think, base Boston, industrial crew working at a lighthouse in New England, and they were supposed to remove a mercury float lens. Little guy, fourth order, small lens, small pedestal. 2 guys were sent out to do it, and so they take the lens off the pedestal and they pull the float up, and they get of course at that point they're faced with a wall of mercury vapor going up their nose, and these guys wouldn't know mercury if it fell on their foot. So they're working away. They collect the mercury and probably scooped it with their hands and all kinds of stuff. And after they get about halfway through the project, they start complaining about, gee, my mouth is really, really dry, but I can't stop salivating, and I'm feeling lightheaded and all this stuff. And so they pull the guys in, and sure enough, they had mercury poisoning from not wearing any protective gear while they're playing with mercury. Well, the work order didn't say a word about protecting themselves from the mercury, because the guy who wrote the work order didn't know anything about mercury. You know, it's inside the lens. Who cares? But you start taking it apart and exposing yourself, then you need to care. And so that's 1972. Then the commandant of the Coast Guard, the biggest admiral you can be in the Coast Guard, writes a directive, and it says all mercury floats will be removed from service. So we're going to take them all out so people aren't exposed to it anymore. And from 1972, in 2004, I removed the last mercury from a Coast Guard lens at Point Arena, California. And that was a first order. That was 600 pounds of mercury. That was a lot. But it took from 72 to 2004 to implement a simple order from the commandant to go out and do something Coast Guard wide. Things don't work at the speed of light in some organizations. You may know that.
But that wasn't because there weren't enough people experts.
Pardon me? No, it's
Because there weren't enough experts to take it out?
It really wasn't. It was because people saw the directive from the commandant. It went right into the in basket, out of their mind, and they went back to doing whatever they were doing. That's why. They weren't being exposed to it. They weren't out in the field. So it really wasn't big on their priority list. Now, if they'd have made them go sleep in the lighthouse for 6 weeks, they may have changed their tune about that. But, you know, it's way over there. What do I don't, that's out of sight, out of mind stuff. So it took 32 years for the Coast Guard to implement that plan, start to finish. But they finally did do it. And I give them credit. And I took a lot of mercury out in the process of that. So.
And Woody, within that, ours was decommissioned in 1976.
When that first event happened was 72.
And then I was thinking just ours then here was decommissioned in 76. I was just asking for the record. Yeah.
Kīlauea Point was 76, right? Decommissioned.
Okay. Well, that was in the time frame, and that was part of that order.
So we're ahead of time for once in Hawaii.
You were ahead of a lot. You were ahead of Point. You were ahead of Point Arena. Okay, so that makes you better than Point Arena. You have the biggest, beautiful lens on this island, and you're better than Point Arena. So I don't know what else you want in life. So when I started working on mercury floats in '83, I did a total of 25 of them for the Coast Guard to get them to catch up. But I'm still doing it. Tommy and I and Leon did a mercury removal in 2022 at Montauk, New York, and we did the Falkland Islands in 2025. We ended up removing 400 pounds of mercury from a lens that had been drained. There's an engineering report from the British government that says we took all the mercury out of the lens. Yeah, it's true.
Wait, so you said you did that in 2022, but this one says you removed in 2004.
Montauk we did in 2022.
Oh.
Montauk was what the last U.S. one was done. Sorry. Virtually not many. The Canadians followed suit when we got into the mercury removal business, and they beat us to the punch. I mean, they did it a lot faster than we did. They finished all the mercury removal in Canada, and they had a lot of it, a lot of mercury floats. The Australians followed suit as well. They don't have any more mercury at all. We don't have any mercury, and I'm saying that as the federal government doesn't have any more lenses that have mercury in them. I'm not telling you that there's some museum like Montauk where they said, oh, let's put a little mercury in there and make it go round for people. Well, that's not a good idea in a museum. Just isn't.
So Woody, I'm curious, the lighthouses that are still in use,
Yes.
different mechanism now to keep them turning? No longer?
Well, virtually all the mercury floats were removed. Not just the floats, not just the mercury, but the mercury float lens.
So now it's a whole different mechanism.
Because they knew they were never going to be used again. So they were part of the mercury removal program that I was involved with was, oh, and by the way, take the lens out too, not just the mercury. So, virtually all the mercury floats are in museums now, and that's a fine thing. Yours is fine because I know it's officially clean, so it's not going to poison anybody. But so most of the British still have, to answer the final part of your question, the British do still have a few mercury floats out there, but they're getting rid of them as well. They're taking them out and finally replacing them with more modern optics. Why not? I don't think there's any left in France. France was ahead of the game.
Woody?
Yes.
But I'm questioning, is it carriage wheel lighthouses still going around?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the ones that you see in
If you see one
different
rotating,
coasts, yeah, it's going to be on a carriage wheel.
it's going to be on chariot wheels.
Carriage wheels, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we do have a few minutes, I think. Mad as a Hatter. It's more than just a rabbit. Believe it or not, top hats like Abe Lincoln wore and everybody else for many years in the Victorian period. The good ones were made of beaver fur, beaver hats, right? Well, cute little story about those things. Beaver pelts, they shave the hair off the pelt itself. And you take a piece of one element of beaver fur and you can bend it like this and let go of it and it goes bing. It won't bend. You cannot bend the stuff. You can steam it. Nothing will allow it to bend. But what they had figured out was that if you expose beaver fur or beaver needles or whatever they call them, the mercury vapor, they go instantly limp. So how did they make those hats? They had a hat form to the shape and size that they wanted. They soaked all the beaver hair in mercury or exposed it to mercury vapor. And then they could put it around that mold and remove the mercury vapor. It would dry and stay in the shape of the hat. That's how they made them. Well, Mad as a Hatter is related to that because these guys were working with mercury vapor probably 10 to 12 hours a day in the Victorian period. And they went crazy, literally, because one of the places it goes is soft tissues, and your brain is a soft tissue. So they went crazy, and then they died from the mercury explosion. So it's a real thing. The Mad as a Hatter is real. It's not just a fairy tale. Thank you. That's all I got. Thanks. Thank you.
Got some questions on Zoom.
All righty. We'll try.
Is it true that there is one larger mercury-bearing lens in Japan?
Oh, there probably is. I don't know it to be a fact, but I know in Canada there was one. So yeah, it was a hyperradial lens, mercury float hyperradial. Yeah.
Is the hyperradiant lens on Oahu a simpler non-rotating design, or does it rotate?
It's a non-rotating lens, so it's fixed. So it doesn't have any mercury association whatsoever. That's incorrect. Well, after they installed Makapu'u in the lighthouse, people weren't too happy with the fact that it was just a fixed light. Now, Makapu'u, being a hyperradial, theoretically has like a 30-mile range. You can't see it for 30 miles. Again, that darn horizon's always in the way. But because of Makapu'u being up on top of that cliff, it has enough clear, it's got like 600 feet to the water. So it can go a little bit further than 20 miles. It can go out probably 22 miles and be visible. When they built that lighthouse, it was to be the landfall light for ships coming essentially from California. It's the first thing they saw of the Hawaiian Islands. Literally, the first thing they saw was the light from that lighthouse. So they knew they were in the right place, and they just had to come around Oahu. And but at some point, someone said, "Wouldn't it be nice if we had a flash there?" They built a mercury float. I mentioned there were three characteristics: fixed, rotating, which is a flashing lens, and there's another one called fixed, varied by a flash. So you have a fixed lens, and then you put some flash panels like these guys around the outside of the lens, the fixed lens, and then you rotate that. That's fixed, varied by a flash. So to the mariner, he sees a white light and then a flash. And then it goes back to just a white light. Then you see another flash. That extra little device that they added on to that lens did float in a mercury float. A very small, custom-made mercury bath. But that was taken out a gazillion years ago.
And one final
Long ago.
question. Is Kilauea's light, was it the largest rotating light with a mercury bearing?
No. There were first Point Arena right off the top of my head. Point Arena was a first order mercury float lens, and that was a real pain to take apart because it was so big.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was curious if you were able to speak as well about, was there much evolution of the history of the light itself inside the lens within the time, for example, that our light was in use? Or did that pretty much stick?
I'm going to rain on your parade there and say no. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Your lens came with something called an incandescent oil vapor lamp. Okay. If any of you are familiar with a Coleman lantern, little pressure tank you fill up, and it's got a little cotton mantle that glows and all that stuff, that's an incandescent oil vapor lamp. Same exact technology, it operates the same way. The only difference with the lighthouse was it was much more sophisticated. It had more piping in it. It had a preheater built into it to heat the fuel so it would vaporize on its own. And you needed somebody that was really well attuned to that machine to operate it. They didn't just pump it up and light it and walk away. They had to babysit that thing. It was very sensitive. But as soon as electricity got to the site, which I am not sure what the year was that they brought electricity into the lighthouse. But when electricity came, the IOV went away. And they went instantly to electric light.
Any other questions here? Mark?
Our lighthouse is a double flash every 10 seconds, basically.
Yeah.
is that the only signature, the lighthouse that has that unique signature, or are there other ones in the world? Are they repeated?
The one, its twin sister on Lake Superior would have the exact same characteristic. If they were both operating at the same rotating speed, which can be changed very quickly, it would have the identical characteristic. But does it matter to a navigator who has his Pacific chart on his chart table and a Great Lakes sailor who has the Lake Superior chart on his table? They're looking at the same characteristic, but they're not looking at the same lighthouse, and they know it. So there's not going to be anything confusing there. But again, they can change the rotating speed so quickly. They're just a little thing on the drive motor when they electrify them, just a turn of a knob, make it go any speed you want, really. But it has to be advertised to the mariner, on a notice to mariner, so that everybody knows what the speed is and what the characteristic is.
So when our light was automated, I believe it was changed to a flash, just a single flash every 10 seconds. So how would mariners have been notified of that change? I mean, presumably new charts would have to be made.
When they change the characteristic of the light, when they shut the lens down and put a new one out on the rail, the Coast Guard puts out something called a notice to mariners. And it goes to all commercial users. It doesn't go to every guy that has a boat in the water. But it goes to any commercial, any military, probably any bigger fishing vessels would be on the list to be notified with a notice to mariners. And that notice to mariners is good for a year. So it's up to the individual user to take the information that the Coast Guard gave them on updating and go to their chart, make a written notation that this characteristic is no longer that, it is this characteristic. And then next year when the light list comes out, because every light in a Coast Guard district is written about in a book called the Light List. The Great Lakes, it's one book with 5 chapters for all the Great Lakes. Hawaii is probably tied in with the West Coast, I would think. I'm not sure. But it comes out every year, and every change to every aid in the entire district is republished in a new book that has the current light.
I thought that when they changed it, we still had a double flash because it was rotating.
Well, maybe
And
the
you
old
could
one.
count.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not. Well, yeah, but that one rotates.
It was,
No, I think I have one.
I don't know. I counted every 10 seconds. I know I was hearing 88, but now, and the earlier digital one did double flash. It was only this latest iteration, whenever that one came in, because I was telling somebody about it and I was like, oh, my lighthouse, I was like, it's not double flashing anymore. So I think whatever the last round they did.
Well,
they
the
took that.
last round with the cute little plastic winky blinkies that they had.
Well, it's gone from the Batman light down to the little tiny box.
Exactly. But as they the nice thing for the coasties was, if you wanted to change the characteristic of your lens, that's a lot of work to get into doing that. It's not just turning a little knob. But when they started putting in the computerized plastic lenses, it was just a matter of pulling the card out, and they take the characteristic card and they pull it off, and they take another one and they stick it on, and it changes the whole characteristic to whatever you want it to be. So it's all in a file cabinet. They can do anything they want.
Right. So if they could do it, why don't they give us back our 10 cents every time? I want it back.
Why don't you write the district office and ask them that question?
I just think it was overlooked.
District
by whoever
OAN is
programmed
where you
it.
want to mail that. From what I've observed of your Coast Guard light, is it doesn't get service from the servicing Coast Guard people right now. That thing hasn't been inspected for a very long time, and I'm shocked. The condition of it sucks, in simple terms. That tower needs to be rebuilt. I mean, the 8 itself looks fine. The little gray donut up there with all the holes around it, that looks new and okay, and I'm sure it's serving the mariner, but one day either the top is going to fall off of that pole or something kind of catastrophic, because obviously the guys aren't going back to the office and saying, we need a new pole, or we need a new platform or something, because that one's in really rough shape. And I don't know where you're servicing. I bet it's on Oahu is where the servicing AMP team is. I don't think the Coast Guard station in Lahui has any ACE navigation people there. Those are all lifesavers.
So what I was wondering,
Sure.
between perhaps yourself and maybe some of the other crew members here, if we could just get a summary of this latest restoration effort that is about to wrap up, just what work actually happened and what was being corrected. Again, I don't know if it's you or if you want to share that with your cohorts.
Well, I would, if you're talking about the tower, I would say let's have JP say a few words. You didn't think you were going to get tagged, did you?
Started with obviously removing all the glass. It's all brand new glass in there. Cleaned all the old sealant out down to the bare brass. Painted it. Replaced there's 10. They were cast iron ventilation vents. They're below the deck. They kept leaching out rust, so we cut them out. Put 316 stainless in. A lot of painting. We painted the roof. And that's really was the major scope of the work. It was basically to make the lens room watertight again.
That's huge.
It is. I mean, because it without actually cutting it in like we did anyway and getting in there and treating it, getting rid of the rust, and then hitting it with the zinc primer, it's just going to always keep doing it. A lot of work actually. The glass, I think there's 64 individual panels. We made 57 templates. Each one is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was settling, but just in the castings of the frames, there was variations. So that was real time consuming. And putting it back in, we do it where it's a float glass. We set it in rubber butyl. And then while it's in the frame, there's a rib. We don't want the glass touching any of the ribs, because if it's panned, we don't get the big weather variations we get on the East Coast, but expansion and contraction starts hitting the frame, you can chip the glass or shatter the glass. And we stabilize it with shim, so we try and get it perfectly spaced with at least an 1/8 inch around the whole way. And it was very challenging to make that happen. With the glazing bar that goes on after the glass is in, that's what they're going to put their seal into. They're not perfectly centered. So even if you have the glass perfectly centered, you put the glazing bar on it. Try and move the glass back over to get it where you're going to have an optimal seal. Probably been going on forever. When we started taking it apart, there was multiple products put in there. Different kinds of sealants. There was like roof tar, there was liquid butyl, there was regular silicone from the depot. So obviously we knew it had been leaking, and somebody just went up there and tried to put a Band-Aid on it. So I'm 99% confident we're not going to have them issues anymore. I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into it. Our products are a lot better than they were even 15 years ago. So I'm pretty confident that we won't have no issues for at least 15 or 20 years by the time we walk away.
Excellent.
Tommy, would you like to describe what we've done in the last few weeks here?
You want to come up? Do you want to come in?
Sure. What we did is, because of all the work with the glass and the framework that JP was talking about. We recommended taking the lens out so it wouldn't get damaged because that lens is kind of big for the area of the lantern room. So what we did is we came here in August and we disassembled the lens. We took it down, we stored it, and when they were ready for us to come back after they got the glass, because the glass took quite some time to make. I mean, everything's on a diamond shape and the radius, so it's not really that easy to make. We came back. When we came back, what we did is we took the pieces out, we put them on tables, and we did a restoration project. We have a solution. It's a plastic that we process into a liquid, and really the lens, the litharge it's called. It's the putty that encases the shims that hold the prisms, and that's really the heart of what keeps that lens together. Over time, through moisture, because it's made of bronze. So if you get a temperature that's, some of them are 115 degrees, and at nighttime they go to 52. What does brass do? It does this, okay? And that kind of disintegrates, and it disintegrates the litharge cracks, it falls out. Litharge falls out, the shims fall out, the prism falls out, and you're sweeping up glass. So what we did is we put this solution on the litharge and then encapsulates it. And it's fully reversible, okay? With whatever we process it to a liquid, you just use that same liquid that we process it with you can remove it. If you don't use that and you leave it, it'll last years and years and years. And so it protects that litharge from falling out and protects, of course, goes further so the shims don't fall out and the glass doesn't fall out. So we did is, and we replaced whatever litharge, and it's just, you know, a new product. It's not a new product. It's basically window glazing. It just doesn't have lead in it. It's the same, pretty much the same thing that they used, you know, a couple hundred years ago. It just doesn't have the lead base to it. Any pieces that, any joints that needed to be filled, we filled it with that. And we cleaned it. We did replace a number of shims because some of them, because there was one part of the tower that really had an issue with leakage, and the litharge kind of fell out, and so the shims rotted away. So we had replaced quite a few of them. We filled that back up with the litharge, and once that was done, it dries pretty quick. And once that was done, we took the lens. International Chimney got a machine called a lull, which that can go up. You can get them 60, 80, 40 feet, whatever you want. They built what they call a crib. It's just a bed. We put lens in there, and we brought it up to the tower, and we put it back together, basically. And we reassembled it, cleaned it, and I'll tell you, it cleaned up very nicely.
Gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Very, very nicely. So we took some pictures today. We put the light back in, turned the light back on, and standing about 300 yards, Leon. About 300 yards. You get that. When you stand that close to the light, you don't get the full effect of what it did to guide mariners in, but you get the nice colors that come out of it, and it's pretty impressive. So yeah, about what?
Rainbows.
But yeah, about 2 o'clock. About 2 o'clock this afternoon, we stepped back and took a look at it. So it cleaned up very nicely. So, you know, when you have your guests there at nighttime, or they'll get to see a really nice, a really nice light coming out of it. They'll get to see the colors. Of course, like I said, they're not going to get the full effect of what it did for the mariners back in its day, but it's still nice to see. So that's basically what we do with the lens.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tommy.
Any other questions?
You get to go see that amazing house.
Any thoughts, Kathleen?
It's not done yet. So there is the hope and the desire and the plan to be opening up you must have planned this question. Opening up the lighthouse to tours again. So we are going to be doing that. We'd love to shoot for by Lighthouse in National Lighthouse Day, which is in August, I think. And I'm hoping we can do some things before that, at least with our volunteers and stuff, and recruiting whoever. I'm speaking to a choir in here, I think, but for volunteers to be helping out with those tours again. So we're a bit far off just because it's not done. We're not ready to bring in people on our rec.gov 45-minute tours. It's going to be different than it used to be because it's going to have to be shorter. But we're super excited, like just to be able to do that. And we will be lighting it on the Lighthouse anniversary this year. It's going to be a little different of a celebration. We'll probably light it again on the 6th when we have our mosaic celebration. So yeah, it's going to happen next time you come back. All right. That was the most evasive, non-committal answer, but that's
Lots more people with your enthusiasm to be able to make that commitment to the community, the visitor community. But yeah. I thought I'd just add that certainly, you know, one of the things as a friends group we were so excited about is that Fish and Wildlife was able to secure a storm relief funding grant, for lack of a better word, that helped fund this particular restoration effort. And we as a friends group, again, we're here to really honored to put a little gravy on the end of that to help finish it out. But within all the, I'll say in my own words, craziness of what's going on within the federal government and funding, to have been able to secure those funds and for that work to continue through the government shutdown and everything that happened, we're so grateful for that funding. But none of that would have made difference if we didn't have artisans and craftsmen and people who care. Chicken skin moment. I mean, that really are putting this history back together and keeping that promise for the future. So thank you, all of you. My goodness, and a round of applause. What a wonderful talk. Thank you for joining us. Aloha.
Well done.